Iran slams the U.S. government for being heavily influenced by the Zionists, which is why Tehran cannot trust Washington.
با آمریکایی‌ها البته بدبینیم، با آنها هیچ اعتمادی نداریم. ما دولت ایالات متحده آمریکا را دولتی غیر قابل اعتماد می‌دانیم، دولتی خودبرتربین، دولتی غیر منطقی و عهد شکن، دولتی سخت در پنجه تصرف و اقتدار شبکه صهیونیسم بین المللی.
The leader was speaking to cadets at a military aeronautical university in Tehran. He said the U.S. administration is appeasing the Israelis because it's under huge pressure from international Zionism. He stressed that the U.S. national interests are in stark contrast to its support for Israel. Touching on President Hassan Rouhani's trip to the United Nations, the Iranian leader threw support behind his political outreach to the world, but he also said that some of the events during Rouhani's UN visit was, quote, inappropriate. From the Crescent Across Solidarity Movement, Mark Glenn joins us to share his thoughts on this. Mark Glenn, Iran's leader has said something that perhaps you can elaborate more on, and the big question is how much is U.S. policy dominated by Israel and the Israeli lobby, I should say, especially when it comes to its foreign policy, especially where in some cases it is said that it runs against U.S. interests.
Yes, well, the Supreme Leader, sadly, is correct in this, and that American foreign policy is dominated by pro-Israel interests and has been now for at least a half-century. Nevertheless, I think that the United States finds itself in a very difficult position right now, particularly given the fact that Russia has stepped into the Middle East equation in a very important fashion. And the United States now is at the point where it has to choose between giving Benjamin Netanyahu what he wants versus doing what is in America's interest to stay alive, because obviously Russia can fight back, not just militarily, but economically and in other ways. The Supreme Leader is correct. The United States cannot be trusted, unfortunately. It double deals, and it's constantly reneging on its agreements. But at the same time, I think that it's important that all countries of the world recognize that right now there is this fork in the road, and the United States is being put in the position of choosing which way it is going to go. And even though in some fashion it is being done to further Israel's interests in the region, this does not mean that Iran and other countries cannot capitalize on it. For example, let me just explain this for a moment. When the Arab Spring broke out, it was obvious that this was something that was being funded and directed and trained with American money through the National Endowment for Democracy. And Iran did not do what other outlets did in decrying this thing. Iran instead chose to try to utilize the Arab Spring in its own interests, even though I'm sure that Iranian intelligence knew that this was something that was being funded by American intelligence. And so, by the same token, these overtures, particularly Obama's phone call to Rouhani last week, even though it is possible that this is a ruse and it is a disguise to lure Iran into some type of diplomatic or political trap, nevertheless, I think that it's important that Iran try to utilize what it can for its own benefits, even though at the end of the day this may very well be a trap.
And quickly, if you can, when you talk about the fork on the road, which direction is the U.S. going to take? Because it is said that, at least not in recent memory, is there a U.S. president that perhaps has stood up to Israel in some ways, and that's President Barack Obama. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't think Obama is necessarily standing up to Israel. I think he's standing up to Netanyahu. I think that there are smarter elements within the pro-Israel community in America who understand that Netanyahu is a threat to the continued existence of Israel because he's so loud, he's so out in the open with his madness. And so what they're trying to do at this point is to isolate him and contain him in order to save Israel, because he will destroy Israel if he keeps running his mouth and engaging America in new wars. And I think that that's basically what's going on here, is that this is an operation in putting a gag around Netanyahu's mouth.
Thank you very much for that. Mark Glenn from the Crescent and Cross Solidarity Movement.